My name's Eric Fruits, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for giving me the time to speak on this. This is regarding House Bill 2291. Just a brief introduction. As I said, my name's Eric Fruits, F-R-U-I-T-S. I'm an economist, and I've worked on a variety of issues involving state and local finance and education issues over the past several years. I'm also an adjunct professor at Portland State University, where I teach courses in the business school and also the urban studies program. And I like to view myself as an objective economist, but and I don't like to think of myself as an advocate. But I have to say I am kind of excited to be here at this hearing today, because there's so many times where I've had to give presentations and testimony where it's someone's a winner and someone's a loser. But this seems to be one of those few cases where we have a bill that would create nothing but winners. If we look around, we see that taxpayers are going to win from this measure. School districts will win. The state school fund wins. And most importantly, you're going to see that some of the neediest parents and children in our state are going to win. The other thing that's interesting about this bill is that it's progressive. It's also the kind of progressive measure that even a libertarian would like, because it involves choice. It involves the choice of providing money to some of the poorer people. Another thing to keep in mind is that while this could be an important bill, it's also a very modest bill. It's not a radical realignment of school funding. It's really an incremental change. Indeed, you could think of it as a pilot project. If it meets or exceeds expectations, it could be expanded relatively easily. And if it doesn't perform as expected, it could be shut down relatively easily too. As noted in the earlier testimony, HB 2291 is very similar to the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship Program that was established in 2001. It provides a income tax credit for individuals and corporations that contribute money to what are known as scholarship funding organizations. And those organizations award scholarships to students from families with limited financial resources. I based my analysis on research that was done by the state of Florida, in particular the Florida legislature, and they found, at least when I was looking at it, they found savings of about $36.2 million. The most recent testimony we heard that looks like it's from a more recent year shows savings of about $39 million. And just to step back to think about, well, how do you get savings? Well, the way you think about it is the state loses money. Of course, it loses money from the tax credits themselves, because you don't get those tax revenues anymore. But what you get in the end is you get savings as students transfer out of the public school system. That relieves cost pressure on the school districts and on the state itself. And that cost pressure relief, then, at least the way that this program is designed, would actually reduce the burdens on the state and school districts. In Florida, we found that they funded about 32,000 scholarships, and 32,000 sounds like a lot, but by my calculations, that's roughly 2%, a little less than 2% of eligible students actually participate in the program. Again, this gets back to the idea that it's not a radical realignment. It's a modest proposal that really takes some of the people who are, again, the neediest and helps them out. So taking the experience from Florida and applying it to Oregon and our situation in terms of enrollment, who qualifies for free and reduced lunch and so forth, I found that in Oregon, taxpayers will win. Taxpayers would see approximately $19.5 million a year in tax savings. I found that children will win. More than 4,300 children who would now be able to experience educational opportunities that they otherwise couldn't afford. I found that school districts and the state school fund wins. For those children who transition out of public schools, the districts in the state school fund no longer have the burden associated with additional students. And this would save the state school fund about $27.2 million. The net savings to the state would be about $7.7 million. Again, modest savings, but savings nonetheless. It should also be noted that my estimates, I think, are somewhat conservative. The school funding mechanism that was developed by the legislature is based on the conclusion that lower income students impose a greater cost burden on schools. And to the extent that this bill would relieve some of those districts of that burden, the cost savings may be even larger than I presented. And again, I wanted to note that this bill could be considered progressive in the sense of progressive taxation. It's progressive in a way that celebrates choice. And as state representatives, you're probably well aware that high-income earners are most likely to take advantage of income tax credits. At the same time, this bill, HB 2291, requires that contributions eligible for the credit must be used on lower-income students. So this isn't a scholarship that's going to benefit the richest among us. Such an arrangement is inherently progressive, in which income is voluntarily spread from the upper end of the income distribution toward the lower end. So let me just wrap this up here real quick and reiterate that this is a bill in which I view as an economist everyone wins and will save the state some money. And also, speaking as a parent, it seems like a bill that will provide opportunities for children whose incomes would otherwise constrain their ability to participate in educational opportunities. And so with that, I could take on any sort of questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Fruits. Co-Chair Gelser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for coming today
to
testify to us. I was wondering if you could walk me through the mathematics of this to help me understand it better. So the maximum cost of the tax credits on the chart on page 4 would be about $19.5 million, which comes out of the state general fund. And the state school fund savings is what you're describing as ADM that we wouldn't have to spend because those students would no longer be in the system. And that difference is the savings. So are you suggesting that to get to that savings for the state, that we would need to disappropriate about $27 million from the state school fund and public schools? I'm confused about where I understand that money would go to a different place, but the savings of money would mean it wouldn't be allocated from the general fund, and that seems like a recommendation to disappropriate $27 million from the state school fund to get the savings.
Well, I think that's probably a legislative issue rather than an economics issue. I guess what I'm saying is if you had the same formula, same sort of funding formula that you had in place right now, you would have a little bit more than $27 million that would not need to be spent by the state school fund. And so then I guess you as legislators could make the decision whether that $27 million stays in the school fund and then increases the funding by some fraction for the rest of the students who are in the system, or whether that money can go towards some other purpose.
Follow up?
Yes.
Thank you. But to get to that number of that $27 million, since there's really only a gap of $7.6 million in your analysis, unless the state determined to disappropriate $27 million from the state school fund, the cost of this would simply be spending another $19.5 million on scholarships for private schools. And then to make up for that, we could either disappropriate money from public schools in order to pay for private school tuition, or we could keep that money there and just realize the entire $20 million loss.
Yeah, I don't know if I would view it as a loss. If you're reducing enrollment in public schools by approximately 4,100 students, as an economist, I don't see why you would need to spend an additional $27 million if you have 4,000 fewer students. Forgive me if I don't understand.
I just as a quick follow-up, I think the question really is, to get to the savings, to me, as I look at this, we would have to disappropriate $27 million. And regardless of the 4,500 students leaving the system, we are more than $1.5 billion short of meeting the requirements of our quality education model. So even if those students leave the system, we are so far away from adequately funding our public school system. It's hard for me to imagine, even with that exit, how we could justify taking $27 million out of the system. And so instead, it seems like the question is whether or not, as a matter of public policy, it makes sense to spend $20 million in public money on private school scholarships.
Yeah, I think the challenge on that is to think that you have to disappropriate that fund. For example, if you decided to not disappropriate that money, if you decided to keep the $27 million in there, that then provides $27 million for all the other students who are remaining in the public school system. I don't know, I can't do the math in my head right now, but that would be, a few dollars more per student that would be available. Again, I think that's more of a legislative issue whether you disappropriate it, but what it represents is savings, and it's really, it's not up to me as an economist to tell you how that money can be used. But one way to use it is to disappropriate. Another way to use it would be to keep it in the system and give everyone, another box of chalk or something.
And then just as one final follow-up, it's really a comment. I think you're right. That is the policy choice that we'd have to make. If we made that policy choice to buy the extra box of chalk and keep that $27 million in the public school system, the flip side of that is that we still now have $20 million we've taken out of the general fund budget at a time we have, a $1.5 billion shortfall. And if you look at what $19.5 million represents, that is not even equal to the reductions we're taking in our developmental disability program. That's more than we spend on Oregon Project Independence. So I think we get into that public policy question of what is more important, those private school scholarships or taking care of the most needy and vulnerable in the state in terms of keeping them living in their own homes, or disappropriating $27 million from the state school fund. So it just raises for me a whole series of interesting public policy questions. Not that there might not be fine educational programs in these private schools, but we certainly have difficult decisions to make about what is the best use of public dollars, and I appreciate the opportunity to have the conversation.
Oh, no, thanks. And, just to follow up, it's really, I don't think it's a choice of 19 or 27. What it is you should be viewed as, if this tax credit program went through, you would have an additional $7.7 million. So it's not like you're losing $20 million. You're actually gaining 7.7. How you get to that gain, whether it's through some sort of shifting the funds to other programs or shifting the money to the additional remaining students, again, is up to you. But in the end, on net, according to this calculation, you'd have about $7.7 million, and that's consistent with what was found in Florida in terms of scaling.
Just so I'm clear on how I think you're describing the win-win-win, which I think is an extraordinary public policy achievement. You are giving low-income students the opportunity to attend private school, which they could not currently do because of their economic means, and at the same time increasing the per student, assuming that you just keep spending the same amount, or that education spending continues to do what it's been doing, you're increasing the per student amount being spent on the students who remain within the public educational system.
That's correct. That's one way of looking at it, yes.
Thank you. Representative Dembro.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'm trying to work through the math too, but in a different way. The assumption here, if I'm looking at the chart right, is that there would be about 4,300 students participating in the program. And of that number, 4,100 would be new students, right? That is,
that's right. That's
students transferring in. So you're saying that currently there are only about 200 students in the state who would be eligible for this, who are going to private schools of any sort? Frankly, that's hard for me to believe.
Well, that's based on what Florida's found. Florida found that approximately 5% of the students who qualified for the Florida program were enrolled in private schools already, which sounds like a very small number to me, too. But I'm sure you guys have much more experience with this than I do. These numbers are very hard numbers to get, so when you have a state like Florida that has actually done that calculation, I had to run with the numbers I had rather than the numbers I wish I had.
No, and I appreciate that, but I'm just very suspicious of it because I look at the private schools around the state, and I know that there are a number of them that are already offering scholarships to low-income students. I think there are many, many more students than this that are currently enrolled that would qualify. And so I think we're looking at, potentially much, much higher numbers here, and thus a much greater financial impact.
Yeah, again, I really can't speculate. I'd rather have some numbers at my fingertips. Although I have a new neighbor. Again, the plural of it, to many economists, it seems the plural of anecdote is data, but this girl is enrolled in a private school, and I was talking to her, and she said, yeah, I'm losing 3 of my classmates in the next month or so because they can't afford the tuition. So I think what you're seeing is you are seeing people impacted by higher tuitions, and a lot of these private schools are also having declining endowments. We're seeing that at universities as well as in private schools. And so I think the ability for these schools to offer scholarships on their own has really been whittled down by the financial crisis. Again, I can't really put a finger on a precise number for Oregon. I just had to go off of the numbers I had from Florida, and I couldn't find anything better or more reliable for Oregon.
Thank you.
So we're almost out of time with Dr. Fruits. Representative Parrish?
Thank you. I hear kind of both my colleagues to each side, and I'm a numbers person, so this actually makes a lot of sense to me, because when I look at the budget, and yes, we're here to talk about general fund particularly, yet this body also legislates fees and things and gives people the authority to raise fees. So when I look at budget for the state, I include all budget. And when I look at where money is tucked and hidden, I guess I look at it as like how I do it at home. I've got multiple accounts, but it's all my asset. And I think what you're proposing, if I understand, is that we're just looking at, yes, there's different checkbooks from a policy perspective, but how do we possibly rethink the allocation of funds from one to the other? You're not, what I don't hear you saying is that you're advocating to give this tax credit, take the money out of the general fund. And when I hear, Representative Gelser say disappropriate money from, this is just moving money from one checkbook to the other, as I see it. And I guess, is that what I'm hearing you explain to us? Because as we make decisions, yes, I think we're making decisions for one pool of money, but I think for us to get better at money, we're going to have to start looking at the big pool of all money that's in this conversation.
Yeah, and at the risk of sounding hokey, it's kind of like shopping with a coupon. I go shopping and I get a $5 off coupon from Fred Meyer, and I say, wow, that's great, and I get to save $5 on my groceries. Well, I have a choice. I can either actually spend $5 less on my groceries, or I can spend the same money I was planning on spending and get another box of cereal for my kids. Those are choices I make as my household legislator, or as my wife would say, maybe dictator, or as my kids would say, well, I don't know what they call me. But anyway, again, I didn't want to sound too hokey, but again, it's really trying to find, how to deal with that cost savings that you're going to have there, and that savings will exist. The $7.7 million. It's just how you decide you want to use it.
You are talking to the person whose vehicle in the basement's license plates do say Coupon Queen on them. So I gotcha.
I hope I wasn't.
That was a good analogy.
I'm right there with you.
Oh, okay. Good.
Co-Chair Gelser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was still doing a little bit of mathematics here, and I agree with Representative Parrish. Any financial transaction that takes place in this building or at your house or at mine involves the movement from one checking account to another. This one involves taking taxpayer dollars and moving dollars from the checking account of our public schools that are serving the vast majority of the children in our state into the checking account of private institutions. And when I do the math, we would be taking $19.5 million and sending that to 4,500 students, or to 4,340 students. For each of those 4,340 students, they are receiving a benefit of $4,500. For the remaining 557,536 students, the net gain they would realize would be about $48. So it's hard for me to understand over the course of a year how the remaining 557,536 students would be equivalently benefited by that $48 per year as the 4,000 students that are receiving the $4,500 and the state of Oregon that is giving up the $20 million, even if it's not disappropriated from the public schools, because it's going to come out of someplace.
Yeah, I'll try to make it as simple as possible. The one way to look at it is you are handing those students in that transfer, you're handing them $4,500 approximately. But you are also saving the state $6,600 because according to what the legislature has determined, it costs students the state $6,600 per student. You've taken those students out, you've saved the state $6,600, and then you've given a chunk of that, about 2/3 of it, to the student to go somewhere else. On net, you've saved money. You've used you've clipped a coupon.
And of course, conversely, you could ask, even though $48 isn't a lot of money, in what way are they harmed by having additional money left in the system to be spent on their needs?
Yeah, and just to reiterate, this is a very modest program. I mean, this isn't, normally I come in and give talks to legislators, and I'm talking about job impacts in the thousands or tens of thousands. This isn't that. This is a modest program. Again, it might be best characterized as a pilot program, and if it turns out to be successful and you see those savings, expand it. If not, shut it down. It's a fairly simple program to turn on and off, it seems.
Representative Comp.
Thank you, Co-Chair Wingert. Our constitutional responsibility is to provide a free public school for our children of this state. I don't know what the Constitution has for the state of Florida, but as co-chair of the Education Subcommittee on Ways and Means, that's our responsibility as legislators to provide a free public school education.
Thank you, Representative Comp. Dr. Fruits, thank you very much.
Thank you for